All right, welcome back to Always Adaptive. My name is Randall James. I'm a certified strength and running coach with 11 years of experience, and today we're responding to comments yet again. I told y'all last time that I would do this about every quarter or so, depending on how many comments I get, and there have been quite a few. As I said last time, text comments are just like text message arguments. Everything, including tone, gets lost in translation, and very rarely do the two parties break ground. Responding to comments in this way allows you and the person I'm responding to understand my thinking and allows me to provide some evidence, if needed, for the things that I've said. Seeing as we're entering the holiday season, I felt now was as good a time as ever to do another one because I do have some videos coming up that I know are going to ruffle some feathers and light up the comment section. So I want to separate those from these. But real quick, if you like getting your health and fitness information from someone who actually reads the studies and can bob and weave between different worlds, strength, running, hypertrophy, then hit that like and subscribe button. I release a new video every single week, and basically this channel is just a means of me getting the things that I like to research out of my head and into a creative outlet. Also, if you're over on audio, a 5-star review goes a very long way towards the discovery of this channel. But with all that out of the way, on to the drama. So this time I broke these comments up by video to keep it and myself a bit more organized. These were just a few straggler comments from my last Dr. Mike Israetel video that I wanted to hit. Let me give you some context before I read these. The video was a reaction I did to Mike's Navy SEAL assessment where he couldn't land the jumping portion and he ran an 800 meter in 5:30. In that video, I went on to speak about how bad a 5:30 800 meter truly is and why it's actually important to be able to run. I used many different examples, including being late for a flight, running away during a natural disaster, running to get help for another person, running away from a predator, running away from a bully or violent criminal, and more. I spent over 5 minutes on this section alone. Here's the criticism. One chimp Bobo says, bro, running from predator in the wild will increase the chance of attack. Halon1313 says, half of this video is running is not good for running, it's also good for running in danger. Of course, the people that had something negative to say ignore everything else and cherry pick the things that are the easiest to try and poke holes in. They don't grapple with the rest of my argument because it made too much sense. And here's some proof. Joseph Jones IV 4806 says, I was at Burning Man a few years back and my girlfriend had a medical issue. I had to run half a mile to the first aid station to get help and half a mile back to my camp. Being conditioned and being able to run can save a life. This story is incredible, and I think we take life for granted. Comments like this remind me that you literally never know when you're going to be in an emergency situation. Things like this happen all the time. I bet this dude's girlfriend was incredibly grateful to be with a guy that stepped up and came through in the clutch. I don't know how severe the emergency was that they were going through, but it sounds like this was definitely a life-saving situation. Bitter Old Wizard says, I realized I need to run more when I had a short connecting flight across the airport with 2 carry-on bags, a small roller type, and a backpack. I almost missed my flight because of my lack of cardio and running. Now that is a real life scenario. This one's a bit more harmless, but if you miss a $200 flight, that still sucks ass. This is also another one that happens all the time. Human beings are unreliable and they're late a lot, and I mean a lot. But being late for a flight isn't the only bad thing that could happen in this situation. If someone isn't used to running and they're forced into a situation like this, it could come with a muscle, tendon, or ligament tear. It could come with a stress fracture or tripping and falling. It could come with a heart attack. There are many things that can happen when you're not used to doing something effortful like running. So you should be used to running. But these comments highlight real-world examples from real people in which running either helped them or would have helped them, and they're acknowledging that. And there are other comments on that video, but I don't want to spend too much time on this one. So if you're not a runner, the benefits of it lie outside of just the typical cardiorespiratory benefits like improved VO2 max and such. The next comments are coming from one of my more recent videos where I went over the Consumer Reports article that showed a bunch of popular protein supplements had lead levels that were higher than California's Proposition 65 level of concern. First up, Mr. Maples says, bad clip, suggesting lead isn't dangerous? This came from a short clip I used to promote the full version of the lead video where I basically went into detail about what data California used to set their 0.5 microgram of lead per day limit. They used a bunch of rodent studies in which the doses were so high that it would be the equivalent of tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of protein shakes to hit that same number in humans. They cited some human workplace exposure studies, but undercut their own argument by saying that they were unable able to draw conclusions from this data because of confounding variables. Now, all I was doing is saying that the FDA has a limit of 8.8 micrograms per day for women of childbearing age, and California used a bunch of BS to set their 0.5 microgram limit per day. This is not me saying that lead is not dangerous. It is me saying that if we're going to place regulatory pressures on companies, big and small, then we had better make sure that it's based on good data. Putting small businesses out of business is not good. And if you're so against big corporations, then you need to realize that this is the perfect way to destroy their small business competitors. Big corps love when regulations like this come out because they have the money for it. They know, though, that the small local farm down the road does not have the money for it. But Barry Robbins 7694 says, regardless of lead's carcinogenicity, lead has other serious health effects. There is no safe level of lead exposure. This was from that same short clip. Basically, what he's trying to say is that we should try to reduce exposure to zero. And I said, so then stop eating vegetables. And he said, is this your way of saying that you have been exposed to a lot of lead? And I said, everyone has. The average lead exposure in the US is 5.5 micrograms, 10 times higher than Proposition 65's levels. I'm not saying lead is safe. I'm saying that to chase 100% safety is a utopian dream that will likely never happen. He then goes on to call me RFK Jr. and say some other BS, basically not contending with the substance of my argument. But that was an important point. The average lead exposure in the US is 5.5 micrograms a day. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't work to reduce that, but to expect that to be 0 or 0.5 micrograms per day is to expect our entire agriculture industry to be changed and for people to completely change their diets. It's just unrealistic to expect. We're human beings and we live in a dirty world. We're never going to exist in some sterile bubble where there's 0 exposure to lead and mold and other airborne pollutants. It's just not possible. These next few comments are from the video I did titled, Does Running Make You Lose Muscle? In it, I broke down why exactly running does not inherently make you lose muscle, but I also broke down when it could. It was a very nuanced video in my opinion. But Adabos Project says, for sure, calorie is the ultimate determiner of weight loss / weight gain. But the benefit of keto is that it helps you manage your appetite better to make it easier and more natural to eat less overall. Most people don't track calories and can't be bothered to, so finding that keto can effectively allow people to lose weight without taking into account calorie tracking in the study is actually quite beneficial. So I've seen and heard this repeated so many times. Keto helps people lose weight because it reduces appetite. This blanket statement is not true. Let me prove it to you. This study titled Effect of a Plant-Based Low-Fat Diet versus an Animal-Based Ketogenic Diet on Ad Libitum Energy Intake in Nature was a metabolic ward study, one of the most tightly controlled studies where the participants actually lived in the research facility. The participants were allowed to eat ad libitum, meaning as much food as they want. So according to Adabos Project's comment, you would expect to see the keto group eating less food than the low-fat group. The opposite was true. The keto group ate more calories on average, 500 to 600 more calories per day. That's a lot. I've told this story before, but I actually have a client that's had a similar experience. He's a type 2 diabetic, and he's tried all kinds of different things to get his glucose down. The one thing he hadn't tried at the time was a keto or carnivore diet. So he decided to go carnivore, which is essentially a keto diet. The first week my client was on it, his weight shot up by about 5 pounds, and both his blood glucose and blood pressure shot up by 10 points each. So there are loads of negative anecdotes that you just don't hear about, and it's because we're all in our own bubble when it comes to fitness and nutrition. Brian Hilario 5230 says, I spent 7 years as a Green Beret. We had to have a hefty dose of cardio to be able to do what we did, but we also had to have a ton of strength. The guys who only lifted because they didn't want to use cardio and lose mass became huge, but had significant issues doing the job. It was frustrating. Then we had the balanced guys who were also like 6 foot, 225 pounds, but also running 3 to 5 miles at a 7:30 pace. Fast, short sprinters, powerful, long sprinters. Are they blistering fast? No. They were definitely stronger than better at running, but these dudes did plenty of cardio almost every day and were still big muscle dudes. It was all about calories. We ate all effing day. I love this comment because it highlights a similar point to the Dr. Mike Israetel video. Here's yet another example of how being able to run would not just benefit you, but our armed services. These are the people that are tasked with defending our country. Brian here is telling us that there are people on the job who have a hard time running, who have issues doing the job they're tasked with. Thanks, Brian, for that comment, and thank you for your service, man. I mean that. Jahi Mudden 2306 says, when I began taking running seriously over the past summer, I lost some quad size. Most of that loss happened because my nutrition was poor at the time, as I was focused on losing weight and did not have enough protein in my diet. Most people will not run enough to lose muscle. Bingo. Jahi nailed it. The only people that have to worry about losing muscle because of running are people that don't eat enough calories and don't eat enough protein. If you check both of those boxes, you're totally fine. Stop worrying about losing muscle while running. Anytime I hear someone say, "Oh, I started running and I lost muscle," I ask them, were you tracking your food? Were you eating enough protein? Were you following a running program or just doing whatever? You can do too much running, just like you can overdo it with resistance training. If I smash my legs 5 days a week, do you think I'm going to build leg muscle or potentially lose some? These next comments are from my David Goggins video, which I knew was going to piss some people off, but it's all good. So this one's long. Simple but Sanctified said, remember, Goggins grew up as a broken person due to several factors, his dad in particular. He adopted, as what he says, a loser mindset and perspective in life. Lack of discipline, consistency, and etc. When he reached rock bottom and decided enough is enough, he knew that he had to change his mind and strengthen it. He used exercise as a means to push his mind way beyond the normal capacity a normal human being can. That is his way, and until to this day, still practices that mindset. So it's not basically how to be healthy for him. It's more on facing demons in life and being comfortable in uncomfortable situations. People need to understand this and not compare him to any type of health fad or whatever. Logic says anything in excess is unhealthy, but sometimes we should think beyond logic and try to put our minds in uncomfortable situations and learn to adapt and thrive in this environment. May it be exercise or whatever means we can. So Simple is right on multiple fronts here. That Goggins has used fitness as a means to push his mind beyond the normal capacity of a human being, and also that we as people should try to put our minds into uncomfortable situations. However, where I disagree is where he says we should think beyond logic. Thinking beyond logic means forgetting that you only have one body. You only get one meat suit, and to do what Goggins and many other ultra marathoners are doing consistently means that when you're 60 or 70, your body is going to be destroyed. I would take that bet 9 times out of 10, not just from a muscles and bones and joint health perspective, but from a heart health perspective. In the full video, I cite multiple studies showing a pretty big increase in non-calcified plaque, meaning the soft stuff that's easy to rupture in chronic marathoners. This is common knowledge. Some running has great benefit. Too much running has great detriment. The dose decides the poison. But when we throw logic out of the window, we forget that there are more healthy ways of challenging our minds. What about meditation? What about confronting your demons head on by sitting completely still instead of relying on destroying your body so that your brain no longer has rooms for the demons? That's all he's doing. He's not dealing with anything, nor is anyone else that uses exercise as an escape. True confrontation of our demons means sitting with them and processing them, being okay with them. Someone who can do that, to me, is way more impressive than someone who needs to distract themselves on a regular basis. Squealer Mocalese 2488 says, Goggins tells people not to train like him. His entire point is that people are tougher than they think, but to not do what he does. He's more about mental strength. People should push themselves, but not do what he does for the third time. He shows mental strength by pushing his body physically. He tells people to use common sense. First of all, I've never heard Goggins tell anyone not to do what he does. And if someone could point me to a clip, I'm willing to change my tune on that. I've listened to hours and hours of Goggins interviews. Some of these interviews have millions of views. Never heard that before. Second, if you think Goggins doesn't want people to do what he does, then honestly, you should have zero issue with me making these videos telling people not to do what he does, right? That's all that long form video was, pointing out the dangers of Goggins' mindset and how it does not relate to health. There are people out there who think what he does is healthy. So I'm just trying to change these people's minds. Instead, people take this as me attacking Goggins, which I'm not. In that video, I praised him on 4 different occasions. I'll say it again. I think what he's done and continues to do is incredible. But there's nothing healthy about it, and I will try very hard to persuade others of the same thing so that they're not left with a broken body when they go and try to be a productive member of their family. Flavor Pirate says, okay, nerdy Danny Trejo, I think the argument that people are overdoing it at population level is crazy. And he has a really long comment here, so I'm just going to skip to the point that I'm going to respond to. There are many replacing one addiction for another. Would it be great if they weren't? Sure, but I think there's a lot more destructive behaviors, agreed, than doing a little more than would be strictly ideal for lifespan. So I guess in conclusion, in my estimate, you're preaching to a somehow unblemished unicorn. Like, who needed to hear that would actually listen? So my response to the previous comment could apply to this one as well, so I'm not going to repeat all the things that I just said. However, what we can focus on in this new comment is the last couple sentences. Like, who needed to hear that would actually listen? I'm going to answer that with other comments on that very same video. Golden Age Jutsu says, this is actually informing. I fit myself into one of these categories. Good to hear a channel that brings you back to earth. Thank you. He said he fits himself into one of these categories. He was referring to the section where I was talking about people that use exercise as an unhealthy coping mechanism. See Flavor Pirate? These people do exist. Here's another. Kandami1 says, thank you for your excellent perspective on the sports/health pendulum. I really needed this. As a competitive age group athlete, it's so easy to get wrapped up in the work needed to compete without considering whether this is the healthiest lifestyle. Same exact thing. Competition is great, but at what cost? Are you trying to go pro? Are you trying to break records? No? Then maybe you should reconsider putting yourself through super grueling training blocks year after year. I'm not talking to Kendami here, more so everyone in general, but the same goes for bodybuilding. There are people that put themselves through hell. They get super lean and feel like crap only to not compete. Okay, so why are you getting that lean? Everyone knows living off of single-digit body fat percentages is not healthy, and the longevity research would back this up. So unless you're competing and think you can actually have a future at a certain sport, think twice before sacrificing your one and only meat suit. And here's one more. Big Orse Music. I love David, and he pushed me to higher heights, but I went too hard in running and got meniscus tears. Now I just run 2.5 kilometers a week just to stay kind of fit and lift weights. Another perfect example of someone who thought they were supposed to do what Goggins does. So to anyone that thinks these people don't exist, you don't live in reality. You're in a bubble. There are loads of these people that try to do what Goggins does. And so I'll put content out there to inform these people that what they're doing is not in fact healthy. Not even close. These next ones are from my functional patterns video. Dan Petty Music says, agreed with most of this video and thanks for the balanced approach. I've recently started working one-on-one with the FP trainer and I'm honestly amazed with some of the things. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but basically what he says is, I'm not a fan of some of the behavior on social media, but I also don't think there's anything wrong with them calling out traditional deadlifts when their methods are way more functional and safe. So this guy had me in the first half. I thought he was just going to tell his story until he moved on to bashing the deadlifts, saying he doesn't think there's anything wrong with calling out traditional deadlifts when their methods, talking about FP, are way more functional and safe. Okay, first of all, according to who? They also bash squats and Olympic lifting too. Are those less functional and less safe? What data do you or anyone else have that their methods are safer and more functional? I'll tell you what data. You have none. This is why functional patterns strikes so many people as a cult, because they go out of their way to bash certain modalities and then position themselves at the top as the replacement, instead of positioning themselves in the same realm like, hey, this might not work for you, and if it doesn't, here's an alternative that has helped some other people that you might like to try. But let me be clear about this, as I have been so many times in the past. There is no such thing as a dangerous exercise. People injure themselves because they do not seek proper guidance on how to load exercises properly. They add way too much weight, do too many reps, and they don't seek help with form. Yes, a deadlift and a squat are both very technical lifts. If you're not someone that has a high level of bodily awareness, then ask for help. I can only barbell bench press every now and then. Otherwise, it irritates an old injury in my left shoulder, a drunken night out story for another day. But I can dumbbell bench press, and it feels much better. Do I then say that barbell bench press is a dangerous exercise? No. There are millions of people that barbell bench press just fine without issue. And I basically said this to Dan, who then says, I do agree. I feel like most people who haven't fixed their dysfunction, though, shouldn't be deadlifting. Experienced body lifters is different. Also, even those guys get hurt. And also, having given FP a chance, I realized that I feel like they bash deadlifts almost as clickbait. In reality, one of the first things they taught me was a proper hinge, albeit the best way I've ever learned from any trainer, and they just use it in a more functional ways, i.e., picking up medicine ball, which is very different and more realistic than a barbell. Now notice, he says one of the first things they taught him was how to do a proper hip hinge. This is interesting to me. So riddle me this. One of the exercises FP teaches is the bilateral dumbbell swing. Why is that not dangerous, but a deadlift is? It's literally the same pattern. There is nothing realistic about swinging dumbbells by your side. Is it that there's a dumbbell in each hand instead of a single barbell? Does that mean that a double kettlebell deadlift would be better? Can someone from FP please answer this? If you're going to teach people a hinge and then have them do ballistic movements through that hinge, why are other hip hinge exercises bad? I'll await your response. William Barron 9867 says, this feels like a video that checks all the boxes for content creators on this topic to make, but without actual curiosity or questing for new behind it. It is very 2018. First of all, I made an almost 20-minute video analyzing functional patterns in great detail. I think I'm honestly one of very few, if there are even any other people that have done what I did and been as charitable as to not just flat out attack them. I actually provided evidence for how functional patterns fascial theory might actually be true. That takes a tremendous amount of curiosity, and everyone that's been riding with me for a while knows that I'm incredibly curious. That's what this whole channel is. It's just me researching shit that I'm curious in. Anyways, Intensity Ben says, I reject entirely the premise that movements that mimic sport will carry over to the sport itself or make a better moving athlete. Getting generally strong in the good old-fashioned compound movements will work wonders for an athlete, and then he or she can take that strength and power and practice the actual sport. I think FP is trying to overcomplicate human movement and basically trash every tried and true method out there. First of all, shout out to Ben. He's been an active engager on my channel for a while, which I do really appreciate, and he's a rugby player who's pretty strong. He has a YouTube channel, go give him a follow. He basically posts his own training, a lot of power development, barbell cleans, and squats. He just hit a 325 front squat a couple weeks ago, absolutely massive. But there are a lot of people that share Ben's opinion here, especially in the sports strength and conditioning world. So I thought this would be an important one to air out loud. Ben's absolutely right about what FP is trying to do. Overcomplicate movement and trash everyone along the way. I also agree with Ben that getting generally strong in the traditional lifts does work wonders for an athlete, and then you work sport-specific skills to take advantage of that strength, GPP versus SPP. I'm not going to rehash that again. Y'all have heard me talk ad nauseum about those concepts. But I don't think it's good to entirely reject something. There's room for nuance here. What I said to Ben is that there may be benefit to mimicking sport during weight training. Some benefit. Do we know how much and during which movements? No, we don't. Is there more benefit to doing FP than just getting generally strong through GPP and SPP? No, I don't think so. I think the biggest thing is that there are a lot of unknowns. I think FPP could find a home in between GPP and SPP, so it would be general physical preparedness, functional preparedness, and then specific physical preparedness. Yes, I know it's functional patterns. I'm just being creative. Another person in the comments said that strength and conditioning coaches on the margins are using some functional pattern style techniques. This was bound to happen. So all we have to do now is observe teams that are stepping outside of the norms and trying new things. Time will tell with all of this. So patience. They'll either prove themselves to be frauds or we'll see them revolutionize sport. And finally, the question that's been on everyone's mind, Giannis Panayotou B9Q says, hey, you gonna make a video on that guy from Australia's video on PhD Mike? Everyone else is kicking him while he's down. The last sentence of this really speaks to me. I've commented on a few of Mike's posts pointing out some of the lies that he's told throughout this whole process. It's been super frustrating because if he had just come clean and said, yep, the written part of my PhD dissertation was dog shit, then this would have blown over in a week. But his initial response was to lie and say Solomon had the wrong copy, but then, oh wait, Solomon actually had the right copy, and it just got worse from there. If you don't know what's going on, a fitness YouTuber named Solomon Nelson got a hold of Dr. Mike Israetel's PhD dissertation. It was messed up. I mean, really messed up. This was an hour-long breakdown of all the mistakes. And Mike tried to debunk everything Solomon said, but then Solomon just made another 45-minute response to it. So the drama's not over, but I said I wouldn't comment on this. I don't have a PhD, and honestly, I respect anyone who goes through such a long and arduous process, and like the commenter alluded to, everyone's been dogpiling on the Mike. But I'll leave it up to you all. What do you think? Should I make a video on the Mike Israetel drama? Leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. But that's it for me. These are a lot of fun, and I appreciate everyone who continues to engage in my comments. Keep doing so, and you never know, your comment could be featured on the next one. But once again, my name is Randall James, and this is Always Adaptive, a business born from the idea that you are always adapting to whatever inputs you provide into your nervous system. Literally, right this moment, whether you're sitting or you're standing, I'm standing. This is an input that I'm providing, that I'm adapting to right now. So control your inputs, and you can control your life. I'll see you at the next one. Thanks for watching. Hit that like and subscribe button on your way out. Stay adaptive.